Alright everybody, I hope this video finds you well. I don't normally make predictions because there's way too many possibilities out there in the world, but I'll go ahead and make a prediction. Talk about the economy here. Here's going to be my prediction for the economy. This is one scenario that might play out, and I'll lead into a few investment sort of strategies surrounding this, okay? So what we're going to look at in this scenario would be like a hard landing with the economy in mid-2024. That means that as opposed to a soft landing that doesn't affect the economy with a major crash, here's a rough chart. Let's say that happens. This is the hard landing. Big crash, and let's just say this is the S&P 500, for example. All markets will be correlated in these types of situations. So why would you say something like that? What could contribute to that, and the timing of that being about mid-2024? So we'll have the rest of this year for things to kind of hash out and play out, and by that time the market will make its decision of what it sees happening, and everybody will hit the exits all at once. That's how something like that happens. And in reality, when we jump down here, we talk about liquidity. That's actually truly what causes all crashes. It's interbank repo markets lending money to each other overnight, and the risk gets too high and the liquidity gets too tight, and that's really it in a nutshell. So anyways, China collapse scare. Semiconductors. So with the things that Biden passed about the semiconductor industry, those have long-term implications for really hampering China and their economy. They do not actually make high-end chips of any sort for cell phones and stuff like that, for the most part. So they're kind of in trouble with all that stuff. So long story short, there's a default by September scare that we might default on our national debt, and that would lead to foreign selling of treasury bonds, which could lead to a contagion if it happens too quickly, too fast, all that stuff. Contagion means something big happens in one market and it affects another market, and probably, multiple markets. Inflation control, which means that the Fed is going to have to raise their federal funds rate for higher for longer. That just means that money is not going to be cheap to borrow for longer, so that hampers the economy, but it also gets inflation under control, because inflation is also based on velocity of money, or how quickly it's changing hands. So supply chain reorganization, that takes time before the new growth is actually leading to the economy and the GDP. So we're talking several years for what happened in COVID shutdowns in China and people reorganizing their supply chains. In America, for example, we might be looking at much more trade with Mexico and setting things up there, for example. Worker disruption, I just put this in here because of the emerging AI technologies, the transformer large language model things like ChatGPT, that within just a few short years could really come out with some killer apps, so to speak, that could replace a lot of jobs, and then factoring that into the economy would be a big thing to think about. So again, to remind you, we're talking about a time frame roughly a year and a half from now for some of these things that we're talking about to play out and cause major effects in the markets. Now, I have listed here as a wild card what's called Fed Now. Most people really don't know about this, which is shocking, because this is literally a new monetary system of how our money works in America. We used to be using SWIFT, ACH, and all that stuff, and we're trying to move to what's called Fed Now, which, long story short, the simple answer is could lead to much liquidity, which actually, as I mentioned earlier, could avoid crashes. So that could possibly kind of change the dynamics of how things work altogether for quite a while. So you wouldn't, yeah, that's, I guess, how I can sum that up. Fed Now is basically what they call a faster payments network. It's going to incorporate crypto-like things, all sort of PayPal, Venmo type things, but it's going to go through the federal system and physically settle as a payment. It's not like a pending payment, doesn't have to go through certain federal banks, that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways that it can work and do things, and that could lead to a lot more liquidity because assets can move much faster and settle instantly. Instant payments, that's what it's about, okay? So that's the Fed Now. If you don't know what Fed Now is, you better look it up, because actually March of this year is when they are starting it. And they're testing a central bank digital currency also with the Fed in New York. So you might want to look into that if you want to know what's going on with our particular crypto, national crypto money. Now, possible investment strategies here with crypto. One thing we know and we always pay attention to is the Bitcoin halving, which is predicted right now to happen on March 29th of 2024. The next Bitcoin top price then historically would be about 480 days later, or July 25th of 2025-ish. Now, the wild card I'll say there, as far as history goes, is that Bitcoin has never gone through a recession, okay? On top of that, regulations with the FTX collapse, who knows what's going to be happening in the next year and a half with regulations, right? Ultimately, regulations are going to be good. I'm just saying they could affect the market heavily one way or the other for a fairly short period of time. Yeah, the recession thing, it's never gone through a recession, so that historic chart might get stretched out a bit longer, in my opinion. So that's basically my predictions for the economy. And let me know what you think. That's one prediction. You know, there's many possibilities. I could lay out a whole nother scenario, but this is like my strongest case, I guess I would say.